Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Patrick Daase, and I'm the chairman of here at AISBL. And it is my pleasure to present to you today during this virtual lunch debate about the importance of adult hearing screening today, March the 3rd, 2022. Now, what is a challenge to society? If you look at this data from the World Report on Hearing published in 2021, and we look at the prevalence of hearing loss, then I would like to draw your attention to the bottom line indicated in black. Now, what you see there is the prevalence of moderate and higher grade of hearing loss going from 2019 to 2050. And what you see that is that in 2019, there were 430 million people having a moderate or higher grade of hearing loss. Now, this will evolve to 711 million people by 2050. Now, when we consider adults and we consider specifically that age group, then I would like to draw your attention on this slide to the third data set, the European region. And what you see there is that when you look at the age group between 60 and 69, then you see roughly 10% of the people have a moderate or higher grade of hearing loss. If you move to the next decade from 70 to 79, you see that 23.4% has hearing loss. The age between 80 and 89, it adds up already to 42%. And then the oldest age category, 90 plus, you see that 56.5% have a moderate or higher grade hearing loss already in the European region. Now, it is not just about the hearing loss we need to talk. Linked to the hearing loss are also comorbidities. And there's multiple of them. Some of them are listed here. I think the top one is definitely cognitive decline or dementia. But others are mental health problems, social isolation and withdrawal, reduced quality of life, fatigue both during and after work, less physical activity, and a higher incidence of falls. Now, what is the impact of hearing loss and the comorbidities on the cost to society? So what is the impact there? Now, if we look across the EU, the cost of unemployment, reduced productivity, and early retirement due to untreated hearing loss adds up to 185 billion euros per year. Yes, you hear it well, 185 billion per year. So this is 17 billion more than the EU budget in 2020. Now, when non-medical expenses and medical costs for other comorbidities are included, the true cost of hearing loss is estimated to be around 213 billion euros. Now, if we compare this to a cost which everybody knows, like linked to dementia, then dementia will cost on an annual basis around 250 billion by 2030. So you see that even with hearing loss, we are not that far away from the total cost linked to dementia, for example. Now, considering all of that, something needs to be done. So what are the solutions to the problem? Clearly, there are two types of solution. On the one hand, there are the hearing aids. So you see on the left-hand side of your slide, different types of hearing aids themselves, going from a very small hearing aid, which is called the invisible in the canal, up to the superpower behind the ear hearing aid. Now, if hearing aids are of no benefit anymore, or don't provide enough benefit, then people obviously can always opt for a cochlear implant. And this is used in cases of severe to profound sensory neural hearing loss. Now, a good question is how many EU citizens, and then more specifically adults, use hearing aids and cochlear implants? If you look at Eurotrack data coming from 2009 up to 2012, 15, and then 2018, and we look into a set of countries, then what we can see if we look into hearing aid adoption, that it increases over time. If we look at the overall group, we end up with an adoption rate of 41.6% in total in 2018. However, I think it is important to consider the different age groups also there. We see for the different age groups marked on the right-hand side of the slide, you see that there's a positive evolution and a positive increase of the adoption rate. However, looking at the data from 2018, you see that the adoption rate in the people aged 44 maximum is 35%, so 1 out of 3. The age group between 45 and 64, we come to a number of 31%, so less than 1 out of 3. And the 65 plus age group has an adoption rate of 49.5%. So even in the best case scenario, in all these age groups, the adoption rate is only 1 out of 2. So only 1 out of 2 people who need a hearing aid are using them. Now, the good news is that the more severe the hearing loss, the higher the adoption rate. So if you go from left to right here on the bars, you see that the red indicates no hearing aid and the blue indicates a hearing aid. You see that for the low levels of hearing loss, you see that 83% of the people eligible for a hearing aid are not wearing one, where if you go for the high levels of hearing loss, then 74% would have a solution linked to their hearing loss. Might be hearing aid, might be a cochlear implant, for example. Now, if we just look at the category of cochlear implants, do we see any difference? So how many adults of all eligible candidates really use cochlear implants? In the table below, you see also the uptake rate for what is called high-income countries. So in the left column, you see the countries mentioned, so varying from Australia, Belgium, Germany, Japan, and so on up to USA. And in the middle column, or the column in the middle, you see the percentage of the uptake rate. Now, best case scenario is Germany, where you have an uptake rate of around 10%, as presented by Professor Müller from Munich in 2019 at one of the major conferences. In all other high-income countries listed here, the uptake rate is below 10%. So less than 1 out of 10 is using a cochlear implant or is having a cochlear implant, where 10 out of 10 would have a potential benefit out of it. So clearly a lot needs to be done there. Now, the question is, why is the uptake rate or the adoption rate so low in hearing aids and cochlear implants? There are several potential causes for that. On the one hand, there's the lack of awareness amongst referring professionals about hearing aids, cochlear implants, the indications, outcomes, and the hearing journey. But there's also the lack of awareness amongst patients or candidates who are eligible for a hearing aid or cochlear implant. Next, there's also the fact that there's no national screening in place, hearing screening in place in any EU member states in adults. Following that, we also have some reasons linked to the personality and the person itself more, like stigma, for example, the fear of surgery in case of a cochlear implant, or other reasons like lack of adequate funding, lack of access, or lack of resources. Now, the reasons mentioned at the bottom are not the case in economically advanced European countries, but one must admit that differences also exist there amongst the different member states within the EU. Now let's tackle the national hearing screening programs in adults. I mean, if we look into the recommendations of the World Health Organization towards adult hearing screening, what are they? In 2021, there was the World Report on Hearing published by the World Health Organization. And there they came up with a set of measures with an acronym called HEARING. And the first H of the word hearing stands for hearing screening and intervention. And you see the other components of the word hearing listed there. But let's just focus on hearing screening for this virtual lunch debate today. Now, what is suggested there? So all older people should be screened with the aim of identifying at the earliest possible stage those with hearing loss who could benefit from the use of hearing technology or from non-technological interventions such as education, counseling, and communication training. Now, when should we do this screening? When should we start with it, and how often should we do it? All adults from the age of 50 years onwards should be screened on a regular basis for hearing loss. The screening may be conducted at 5-year intervals until the age of 64. Then onwards from the age of 65, the frequency of screening should be increased to every 1 to 3 years. Wherever possible also, it would be good to link hearing screening schedules to other health checks, like different cancer checks or whatsoever. Now, how is it set up? If we look into the screening itself, the first step would be really using day-to-day live simple questions. So you see there's 3 parts to it. So if you look into section A, it's just yes and no questions. So for example, do you have a hearing problem now? Do you have a diagnosed hearing loss? Or do you use hearing aids? The next set of questions you see marked under section B, the skilled questions. So how would you characterize your hearing, for example? And then finally, section C indicates that we can use an existing screening questionnaire like the hearing handicap inventory for the elderly. Now, once that's done, we can go to step 2 of the screening test. And that is really a more objective test, let's say, where we can, on the one hand, use the detection of pure tones in both ears at a fixed decibel level. We can do the digit triplet in noise test. We can determine the air conduction thresholds through pure tone threshold screening, or we can do the whispered voice test. Now, if based on the screening, a refer result will be present after wax removal, of course, if this was indicated, then a diagnostic hearing assessment should be done to confirm the hearing loss and establish the degree and the nature of it. So what is then the minimum set of testing which needs to be done? On the one hand, it's the pure tone audiometry, where PTA is then calculated, and that's done based on air bone conduction measurement. We would do tympanometry for middle ear assessment, and wherever it's feasible, we would also do speech audiometry. Now, based on that, we define the type of hearing loss and the degree of hearing loss, and then we would come with an intervention. And that intervention must include a basic education and counseling on hearing loss for people with hearing loss, but also for the caregivers and families to facilitate psychological acceptance and adjustment. This should also include communication, training, and adaptations in social and physical environments and peer mentoring. In addition to that, I think the need for and the type of hearing technology should be assessed, and whichever technology is required. That could be hearing aids, cochlear implants, or other hearing implants, or hearing assistive technologies should be provided and fitted by a trained professional who is authorized to do so. So, coming to the end of this presentation, what needs to change? In summary, I could say that hearing loss must be addressed as a public health issue. In addition, there is a need for policymakers to allocate resources for and plan strategically to promote access to ear and hearing care. In addition, public health strategies should address prevention, screening, and early intervention of hearing loss. And I think that is one of the key messages I want to pass on today during this virtual lunch debate, definitely. I think we really need to tackle the public health strategies and make sure that things like adult hearing screening get implemented on a nationwide level in the different member states of the EU. With that, I would like to thank you definitely for your attention. I look forward to the Q&A session. And if you have further questions or if you want to have more input, don't hesitate to look at one of the websites mentioned on this slide, or feel free to contact me through one of the channels. With that, I would like to wish you a very nice continuation of the webinar. And as I said, looking forward to the Q&A session. Thank you very much.